for somebody who really has a high need for affirmation, I don't think that's a fun place to live when you constantly feel you need that. And I think most people just to maybe hear this and recognize like, wow, I wonder if that is me. Like, do I wear people out? Do I have those high demands? To ask yourself why, and then maybe you do need more of the self affirmation. Like, man, I can live life without all of that praise, all of that time. Hey everybody, welcome to the Mind Muscle Connection. I'm Joe Klimzeski with Tyler Weeb. Today we're going to talk about affirmation. I tried to think of a better title, Tyler, but it really comes down to that. And I, I came at it first from a perspective that a few people around me incessantly need affirmation. They have to be the center of attention. They they're just exhausting. Matter of fact, I will say a friend of mine came to me after spending time with another friend and just said, "My God, that person is so freaking exhausting. Like I just felt like I had to take a nap after being around him because that person just needs that." And interestingly, I decided I need to look into this a little bit more because we all need affirmation. We do. Like we would all wilt without it. We have to have it. But at some point, some people either need more or there's a reason they feel like they can never get enough. And so I did a little reading and looking some things up and found Gabor Mate, a pretty popular psychiatrist, had a lot to say about this. And he said there is the natural need for affirmation, as I described, but somebody who just never feels like they got enough or they just constantly need it, it's never filled up. It's just all rooted in trauma. He said plain and simple, it's just trauma, 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 trauma. So I'm curious what your thoughts are just on the topic because it was so random, I'm sure, of me to say, hey, let's do one on affirmation.
Yeah, when I got the message, I was like, "Oh, that was different." I don't know what I was expecting, but not affirmation. And you're kind of talking about maybe a better title. And I think the word empathy came to mind as well, and in a sense of they can almost be married together when you are dealing with someone where it's like, hey, this is that reality in being for them and being able to take that step back and have that empathy and realize it from that viewpoint where someone is always looking for that affirmation. There is a true reality there for that person where yeah, there is that trauma, there is that whatever they might be looking for. So that was, I don't know, I hope maybe that works as well and can maybe blend into our conversation. But yeah, affirmation, I think it can be a tricky thing for someone like myself who does look for affirmation and wants to be seen and wants to be heard, and not in an arrogant type of way, but in just a very basic need way where that was maybe something that I hadn't gotten a lot of in my life throughout my experience. um because a lot of times it can feel like you're also almost like begging, not begging for it, but like you can almost like whining for it, complaining for it. I don't know if that quite the words quite work. I hope you kind of know what I mean here as well as the listeners, but you can almost feel like a burden on some people because it's a lot of the times it's I just want to hear a good job. Like that's it can be just as basic as that type of stuff that I don't need much. Just tell me occasionally that I'm on the right path or I'm doing a good job or you like this. And it's people will say, no news is good news, not for someone like me. I interpret it no news as bad, as negative, as that, I am not part of something if I'm just being not, I wouldn't say ignored, but just not hearing any feedback or any affirmation on what I'm doing. And so yeah, for myself, it's a big struggle because I'll have that big back and forth where, I'll really want to hear it, but I also don't want to bother somebody and almost grovel for it. You want it to be natural. So it can be a hard thing for someone that really does look for it and kind of quote unquote needs it a little bit more in their life maybe.
And we both coach a lot of bodybuilding competitors, physique sport competitors, and talk about a population where this need is a little bit higher or a lot higher because we're getting on a stage, we're looking for that attention in some capacity. Some people, um, for somebody like me, that was the worst part of it. I love the entire process up to it. I just love the transformation. I love the markers along the way of progress. And then the day of the contest, I hated. I just wanted to get it over with because I'm totally introverted, the opposite.
Yeah.
And this, I hope people can see the difference here between the normal need and then even from childhood, because Dr. Mate talked about, that's where these traumas come from. And then how we can go from one side to a corrective, felt perception of having enough. So, for example, I had both a mom and a dad who were completely supportive, did nothing but build security and independence. There was nothing but spoken pride and affirmation. So my ego needs and my need for attention are just really, really low. I mean, they just are. But like you said, I still love to hear that I'm doing a good job. I love to be affirmed, but I don't feel the need to seek it out. The way I recharge and the way I feel better is to go a lot. I need time by myself. Other people who have those higher affirmation needs, they've got to constantly be around people where they just have all that friction of complementary interaction. But when he said trauma, here's how he described trauma. He is from Hungary or Austria. I think it was Hungary. And he's got to be close to 80 years old at this point. So his grandparents were killed in Auschwitz. His mother had to hide from the Nazis. And so there were times where literally, like as a 1, 2, 3-year-old child, he just remembers even as a young boy just being on the run and being a burden. Everybody was just trying to survive. And he went through an ayahuasca journey, or no, I'm sorry, it was a guided psilocybin therapy intervention. And he said this was when he was about 70 years old. So he went into a heavy, heavy dose of psilocybin, probably close to 5 grams. And then he was with a counselor, a licensed mental health therapist. And he said the first thing he did when he was really submerged in the psychedelic experience was connecting with his inner child. He said, I felt like I was 1 year old. And all I did with this therapist was sob and sob and sob. And the first words that came out of my mouth was to my mother, I'm so sorry I was a burden to you. I'm so sorry I was a burden. I'm so sorry I was a burden. And so he's grown up his whole life. Like that's been in his subconscious that I'm not worthy of affirmation. I was a burden to my family. And that's how deep these kind of things can go. We don't have to have run from Nazis to have that level of trauma. You can have parents that were super critical. You can come from a family where everybody was just so busy. This is why some people who are the babies of the family end up being the class clowns, the people who need more affirmation because they're just kind of tugged along and they have to fight for that attention. So this stuff goes deep in our beginning wiring as children.
Yeah. I mean, even like kind of, similar experience for me. I mean, mine wasn't on psilocybin, mine was just in a therapy session, but it was kind of that, you know, looking at yourself as a kid, and for myself it was, saying like you are enough, you are loved, you are, yeah, you are enough. And so it took a lot of years to get there, and to those layers of working through just like initial, top of the brain stuff, and really kind of uncovering and peeling back the layers of, where all of this is coming from. And so yeah, I think once you kind of have that realization, at least for myself, like it's still, still certainly a big struggle for me, and going in that back and forth. But I think part of it too, that does kind of start that healing process of, you can have affection for yourself, and that can be, enough. I know we say that we definitely still need it, we'll wilt without it from other people, but I think in one sense it really brought it home where I can tell myself I'm enough, and that can be an affection, but also narrowing that focus of, who do I care to get affection from, and the levels of what it matters and how much it impacts me. Affection from my wife in many different ways is going to be far more important than, whomever, right? That might be still within my circle. And so I think it was also bringing in that kind of confidence as well, where you can kind of come back from that, you're looking for it from everywhere, you could, and then realizing you can find it within yourself, and those that are very close to you, that can be enough.
Yeah, I love that you actually led with empathy and the fact that we're looking at other people and their need for that. There is a substantial amount of research that if even just self-affirmation, let's go there first. As corny as it seems to have this as a therapeutic exercise, a therapist may say, hey, 5 times a day, you need to look at yourself in the mirror and say these things. And there are books and videos on just the types of affirmations. You can even play them in the background, like playlists of these words that are just incredibly encouraging and specific. And research shows that those people who are consistent with that go through substantial neuroplastic rewiring where dopamine receptors become more sensitive to that. And that this is part of that mesolimbic dopamine system where we are seeking it. That's what drives us. We seek affirmation. That's a goal. We have to continually pursue it. And this rewiring is consistently shown to happen. And it made me think. I didn't find anything on this, so I'm not going to say this is going to hold up to the same kind of scrutiny. But from other people, I just have to throw out the conjecture that it's even more meaningful. If you can get that kind of rewiring in real neurons in your brain, we crave this acceptance and this affirmation from other people. If we can substitute that, call it affirmation masturbation, we can do that for ourselves and it creates real biological neural change. Imagine when we are getting it from the people we want it from. And I would say in relationship counseling, I mean, that's probably what 99% of relationship counseling is coming from, is that desire to be reconnected like you once were. So I think you're exactly right, bringing up like your wife and saying, hey, I really need you to be this way for me. And we could even probably you're familiar with the five love languages. Like
Yeah.
what's one of them? Words of
Words
affirmation.
of affirmation. Yeah. Yeah.
So it
Yeah.
yeah, go ahead.
Oh, I was gonna kind of just piggyback on that, and like my wife and I, like we're in marriage counseling right now, and not because anything's horrible, but we bought a house, we went through COVID, we had a kid, we're very, deep into new like careers, all within the span of about a year and a half, right? Like we did all of these major life changes, got a dog, right? Like, and so there was that just natural disconnect where like it wasn't that. And kind of what you said about how a lot of marriage counseling is just now working on, that affirmation. And that has been a big part of it, of just like being vulnerable enough to say, hey, this is, what I need on a deep level of that affirmation or that empathy or, whatever it might be. And so yeah, just kind of funny that I guess we were talking about this today, and this is part of kind of just what is a big factor in my life at the moment, and things that I'm just really focusing on, and making sure that not only am I asking for the affirmation, I am also giving and being aware of the affirmations that my wife may need. And so it's yeah, it's at the forefront of my mind right now, especially a lot these days.
Well, neither one of us are mental health therapists, but we have some experience. It's bizarre that so many of my friends are therapists. Maybe that says something about me.
You get free therapy all the time now.
Um, so when my wife and I were in counseling as well, and specifically marriage therapy, and both of us having individual therapy, one of the first exercises this therapist did for us, and I've since found out it's very, very common, is to look at each other And, he would say to one person, okay, here's kind of the prompt. You say this. The other person has to repeat it back. This is what I heard you say, blank, blank, blank. Was that correct? And part of the communication problem my wife and I were having was so identified right there because, when she repeated those words back to me, I said, yeah, that's not what I said. And then we did it again. I repeated it, and counselor said, okay, now Tracy, repeat that back. And after about 5 times, I said, yeah, that was right. And he said, no, it wasn't. Like, you can't bail her out. Like, no, it wasn't.
Yeah, you just
And
give up.
and it was so bizarre that she just could not do it. And he said again, like, for whatever reason, going back to her childhood, um she was already thinking what to say. Like, as soon as I would say something, her brain was somewhere else, and she just wasn't even looking, wasn't even thinking. And so her homework was, when you and Joe are talking, Tracy, you have to stop and look at him, and your eyes are on his lips, just like if we were in this session. And dude, the first time that I saw her actually do that, like she's working, like she's taking this therapy serious, that was affirmation. Like,
Yeah.
it just made me feel so deeply that, wow, she's trying. And that's what we do for each other. And so to spin this back to your original point of empathy, like, just to realize other people, if they have such a high need for affirmation, if we give them that, that's the confidence they need. That's almost going to create that neuroplasticity that then they don't quite feel as empty without it.
Yeah. It's like, that's just, it's just so crazy how you both can hear the exact same words and derive completely two different meanings from the exact same words. And I think it's such an important lesson on just how our experience and our reality drives that thought process, and just that, what's blanking on the right word, but kind of that, just that a circular thinking that we can kind of fall into, and just our own perception, and like just how quickly we'll just go with that and assume that's what that person means, when like in reality you guys are on complete opposite sides of the spectrum, despite hearing the exact same words together. It's just, yeah, I think it's just such a good lesson in having just that affirmation of listening and understanding and empathy of, you don't know what that person means, and so being able to repeat it back to them and go, hey, is this what you meant? Man, like, that's just, it's so important. I think we just brought that up as well. Like, I heard it somewhere where if you're able to do that, like, they've done studies where if you're doing it with like someone, let's say, just on the opposite political spectrum, it brings down the anger and the angst and the fighting so much, because now you are very much interacting with that person, and it shows that you were truly actually trying to understand their perspective, and not just, like your wife, like Tracy was already doing, was coming with her thought process already before she even understood what you were trying to say.
And what I want to do to finish is bring it back to our personal responsibility in recognizing this, because obviously I had things to work on as well interrelationally. But for somebody who really, even with cause, has a high need for affirmation, I don't think that's a fun place to live when you constantly feel you need that. And I think most people, just to maybe hear this and recognize, like, wow, I wonder if that is me. Like, do I wear people out? Do I have those high demands? To ask yourself why, and then, maybe you do need more of the self affirmation. Like, man, I can live life without all of that praise, all of that time. And maybe just the sensitivity of you giving it to others, because if you're somebody who's constantly begging to be that center of attention, you're obviously taking it away from other people. So again, non-therapist, but I think a good activity would be, wow, maybe I need to stop and listen more, and I need to be more affirming to other people. And as I give that, I will feel like, they're wanting to reciprocate to that point. But at the same time, the cliche, it's better to give than receive, is like, I think you would really feel more connected to other people when you are on the other end, giving more than you even expect.
Amen.
All right. Well, I hope that helps again, because physique sport people, I mean, I see it in our crowd a little bit more. So I would really just love for people to walk away feeling like, man, this is a place I can gain some security. And if that's anything in my life, then I can kind of subdue that and just feel happier and more at ease. But we will see you guys next time in the Mind Muscle Connection.